All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of Group Up, and boy, we got a good one for you today. With me, as always, is my co-host and friend Frito. And yeah, apologies for taking a little longer, but I promise you guys it's worth the wait because we have Overwatch legend Jake sitting us with here, Junkrat incarnate, former Overwatch League player, now Overwatch League caster. So Jake, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, stoked to be here. It's my bad, by the way, that things are delayed. I was running some last minute Christmas shopping errands, so it's on me, Twitch chat. My apologies.
Twitch chat, you're gonna have to find a way to just harass Jake now for the rest of the stream. Just
Good
I'm
luck.
pretty sure they sell those Junkrat backpack tires, right? I think he got everybody one of those.
Yeah, I bought
Sorry to
10,000 of
spoil
those.
exactly. And they all have a little rating about the tire rating. It's like out of 10. It's like you're a 9. It's just a little bit for everyone. So,
That's a MVP or a real Jake super fan joke right there. Like I got that one, but
Yeah, the tire ratings.
rate my tire. Anyway,
exactly. I'm at stream. I'm actually low key Jake super fan, but we'll get to that later. All right. So just as we were tuning in together, we were discussing what Jake has been up to recently. So we thought we'd actually share it all with you guys. So for those of you who don't know, Jake has been playing in a tournament called Breakable Barriers, which has seen a large number of the streamer section of the Overwatch community actually joining in and participating, and lots of fun, lots of hype. So Jake, do you want to fill us in on how that went and how you found it?
Yeah, so I just made a team with some friends of mine in the community that I've known for a while, who all happen to be streamers. I started with Custa because, of course, we're both recently retired, so we're like, oh yeah, we can play and stuff like this again. That sounds like fun, so let's do it. And then we just sort of from there gathered more people, brought in a Vast and Fran on support. Custa willing to flex just to fill the team, so he played tank. We also got Clone Man to have a little bit more of a practice tank player in our tank line. And then J3 to be my DPS partner. So yeah, we had a really sick team. We had a great time, made it to the round of 8. But mostly we just had like a ton of fun playing together. And I think like the takeaway from me is just that even if you're in a position like we are where we're not really caring about like winning or competitive success, it's like just super fun to play in an organized environment where both teams are like a whole team working together. And the tournament just kind of provides the structure you need for that environment to work out and make sense, and the organization for it to actually happen.
Yeah. So one of the things we were talking about stream just as we came on is it's pretty. I imagine for Jake it's a pretty refreshing change to go from competing 24/7 really seriously, trying to win the Overwatch League, trying to be the best player ever, and then obviously you're still trying to win when you're playing in a tournament. You don't ever lose that competitive edge, I don't think, once you start. But to be able to play, for fun, it must be quite liberating as well, right?
Yeah, it's like you're trying to win, but you also know that it's not like make or break. I think as someone who's trying to make it as an esports player, it's kind of different. You're like, if I win this tournament, it's like another thing to add to my resume that makes me more likely to get picked up by a team or to make it successfully. But knowing that I'm not aiming for those things, it's like I don't particularly care if we get top 8, top 4, top 2, top 1. Like, I mean, it's kind of no difference to me as long as we play. And if we got eliminated super early, I'd be sad because we didn't get to play too much. But I was actually super happy with how far we made it. I think we beat our own expectations, so that was really awesome.
Well, that's great
it's
to.
really fun to watch for sure. As a viewer of it, I had as many streams as I could find screens for around my house, like watching everybody and like snapping to see all the different plays and the different comps that were getting run. I think two different routes that we can go to talk about it is either the patch and the balance and how the game's playing just as a game itself, or there's like the esports side of it. And I don't really prefer one over the other, but I think it being an event. I can't remember if we've said this on the show or prior to the show, so I apologize if this is repeating anything. But the coolest thing to me for it being as for an event though is this. I've always wanted like a team queue or face it tournament type thing, and with this having a set day, two day, there's another weekend as well next week for the EU players, but it was a way for all the community members to just squad up on teams. And as Jake's saying, there's a lot of teams like that where you see streamers, Red Shells on a team, or with Harblue and Kefri, and there's all these either aspiring pros, could be pros, former contenders pros, and streamers kind of mixed together. And it makes for a really entertaining viewing experience, I think, because it gives you the gameplay that we all want to see in Overwatch, but not to the try hard level that gets grinded out when you're playing in a league format where this is something that I know you're maybe not too fondly aware of, but being forced to play the meta and then having to decide like can we even afford not to play it and that. So whereas if it's a one-off thing, it's a lot looser with the team's approach to it and what they are even allowed to play allowed, right? Because if their goals are just to win or just playing to their strengths, as a lot of teams attempted to do, but also it's not like you're watching a stream and there's throwers or I was gonna say hackers, but there's been some over the side, so maybe I'll
Okay.
just leave that to the side. Not really as many accusations, but everyone's like a community member, right? And it feels like a pug, but elevated to a bit more serious level. And you get to see a lot of beautiful Overwatch, for lack of a less corny word. But
Yeah.
I was
I
a
mean,
big fan.
I think another thing that people really like is just the ability to like see a player's POV the whole time, and maybe even watch like a couple POVs, like you were saying, like to get like a more full picture of the action. But then you get the team communication experience, like what are the players saying to each other, like and they're gonna like tell you what's gonna happen next because they're gonna make the plan of like, hey, what do we do this fight? Are we gonna use these ults? Do we fight here? Should we back up? Is this fight lost? Like all those sorts of things. So you get to see it's like a lot more like really playing the game than when you watch esports. I mean, it's so refined to the point when it's on a team where it's like kind of unimaginable, I think, for someone just playing ranked on their own. It's like you really can't really prepare yourself for what it is actually like for the players in the match, where like what they're saying is like, I mean, as a pro team, you're not even communicating everything because so much is like naturally understood that you're only communicating the things that are a departure from what you've already practiced and iterated on. So I think the casual, semi-casual nature of it, and on top of people being able to stream their real POV, I think like the viewership really showed this weekend. Like most of the viewership was going to like all the individual people's POV rather than the sort of casted professional side of watching it. So I think it showed that people really love that. They want to see organized Overwatch, but they also want to see what does it look like as a player in organized Overwatch. So can they like recreate any of that with in ranked on their own, or like duo queue, party queue with their friends, or even like if they want to make their own teams, if they want to scrim. I think like that can be a really valuable education to sort of see how do you go about doing this? How do you play as a team? There's some basic skills there that everyone who has them now pretty much just got them from trial and error when no one was there to teach you. But now there's like a lot more resources with something like this. You can watch these VODs and I think learn a lot from any team of like, how are they coordinating? What sort of strategies are they going to go for? Like, especially if they're not going to play the default meta. We pretty much played the meta the whole time. We just wanted to like do the best we could um, and played pretty much like the dominant meta. I played Hanzo almost the whole tournament, but we had some fun with it. We definitely brought out like not super meta. We brought out some Junkrat and some Pharah comps, and we had our own like innovative comps on a few maps, but kind of grounded in a base of like mostly playing the meta. And I think that was a really fun mix for us. It was the right amount of meta. Like maybe a pro team would learn how to play the meta on every map, but since we didn't practice whatsoever, we were like learning how to play in the tournament. We're like, oh, remember what that team did to us that worked so good on Kings Row? Let's pick Kings Row and try that.
Yeah.
And that's basically how we played the whole tournament, of like just like learning as we go, and that element of it was pretty fun, like that casual side.
Well, it's great to hear you were having so much fun. I have to make a quick admin note. Frito, according to chat, when you step away from the mic, it's breaking up quite frequently. So, chat is complaining that stay close to the mic, Frito. Uh,
Okay.
no,
God. Okay. Try to
yeah,
fix that.
no worries. So I mean, yeah, it's really good to hear that you're having so much fun. And I think one of the things you touched on there is the idea that maybe this is a necessary and helpful step from going from nothing to Overwatch League, right? Because one of the issues that Overwatch is having right now is the progression, the tier scenes. How do we get someone from a ladder champion to being an Overwatch League player? And of course, in the last group up call, we discussed the Jane incident where Jane spoke about how there isn't a lack of structure and infrastructure for players who are trying to go pro and make this out of a career, but they're a lot of them are being lost by the wayside. So do you think that this kind of could be a helpful step to have more tournaments like this, to having players actually transition? Because you mentioned that this is helpful in teaching people in the way that you didn't ever get the chance to see something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this sort of tournament really is the grassroots that people are looking for. Something like Contenders is just never going to be grassroots because you need like an organized team, and your team has to stay the same throughout a whole season of contenders, which I think is kind of a problem actually for that level of play. I think that one thing that I always experienced coming up in esports in like other games mostly prior to Overwatch, because Overwatch obviously exploded so quick with the OWL being this exogenous factor of like making everything way faster than it would be normally. Thankfully for a pro player who wanted to actually have a job doing
Sure.
it. But in past esports, having this sort of like roster instability is like a constant. And I think it's almost what it should be though at a low level, because at a lower level, you're going to have higher variance in team skill. Like not every player in your team is going to be really, really good. Some of them are going to be better than others realistically. And part of the process of becoming a pro player is like, if you are the best player on your team, maybe that's okay. But when you start becoming the best player by like a big margin, it's actually not okay. And you need to leave that team, because you don't want to be carrying. I mean, it's actually like, if you want to be a pro player, you do not want to be carrying a team that is like not as good as you. You don't want to be the team carrier. You want everyone to be carrying equally and everyone to be a strong player. So if you're a really, really strong player, instead of playing with 5 other like moderately strong players, you should try and find 5 other really, really strong players just like you, so that your whole team can succeed together. And the same goes for if there's like one weak player in the team, maybe you need to replace them and find a better player. And that's just the reality of it. Like, not everyone is going to put in the same level of effort, and not everyone is going to get the same results. For whatever reason, right? Whether that's about their practice, or whether that's their time commitment, or whether that's their natural ability or talent. I mean, those things are really hard to gauge, but there's reasons for roster instability, and like the shakeups that happen usually are like, the way I look at it is a sort of sifting the ground until like the best players kind of rise to the top of an environment like that. And I actually think that roster stability and like having the same team for a super long time is actually not all that valuable outside of like the very, very, very top end of the game. Where if your team is like so good that you're winning the world championship, then it's like, okay, maybe we don't need to change anything, and we just make like minor adjustments. Or if we're really good in the Overwatch League, we just make little tuning changes. But pretty much anything below that, even like mid or lower, if you're not performing, you're not having a good success in the Overwatch League, you probably need to make changes. And that's just a competitive reality on like any competitive endeavor is going to be like that. So I think this type of tournament where you can just have a team for a weekend, and that's all you need to commit to staying together for is 2 days. Right? Like, I mean, if you can't handle that, there's a problem. But like realistically, it's pretty easy to make a pug team for a weekend, and then you can change the roster and have different people on the team next weekend. And I think that sort of like iterative environment where you're trying, it's like, that's the perfect environment for people to get. Like, I think a lot of people usually do tryouts in tournaments like that. And actually, I think that's the ideal environment for a tryout, because you get the match intensity, the choke factor out or the clutch factor out, right? Like to see who's better in those high pressure scenarios. But you also get like, it's not like a huge commitment. You're not like signing contracts, and you're not, it's not like a months long thing. It's just this one weekend. So it's way more realistic for a lot of people who can't commit to like being on a contenders team, let's say, for whatever reason, they can't commit to that level of practice. Then they can maybe commit to this level of commitment where it's really just like a couple days in a row where you need to be ready to play.
So yeah, so just to summarize quickly some of the topics you touched on there: flexibility, having things be shifting in flux a lot more often, and having not being tied down so much, you feel like is a step in the right direction, and one that maybe contenders at least should perhaps implement a little bit more. Is that fair to say? And Frito, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I appreciate Jake's perspective in that, and I think that's congratulations on the OWL signing, by the way. It's something that you'll be able to give to the whole community, and I think with like Overwatch League has top tier talent, the casting talent, but with Jake and Custa bringing in, we'll be able to get a lot more takes like that, which I find super valuable, because I only see things from my own perspective, being mostly a viewer and want to be analyst in my own capacity. But the thing that I like about these one-off tournaments is that it reminds me of the old esports feel of things and how Overwatch used to run, like back when Jake was starting out, where you would have like a tournament, and you wouldn't have so much time on a patch to be certain what the meta was, to be certain about how to interact with it. Like, we have a good idea what it is, but there was still enough room for flexibility and stuff, even in this tournament as well. So we got to see some experimentation, right? Whereas when you have enough dedicated time to grind week after week, all these scrims before you see a game happen, you don't see as much interesting innovation, and it's a much more refined. So that's one benefit actually of a lower practice time next year in the Overwatch League. I'm a little excited for, because I'm like, stop honing everything. Stop making everything
Mm.
so perfect. And take some risks on stage, okay? Because that gives us a little bit more, excitement, trial and error. Now, not everybody's going to be happy to do that, but I'm happy as a viewer to see pros sweat with the anxiety of having to do that a bit more on the fly decision making. Like, for example, that's something I noticed. Jake, you guys had an awesome series against the South American contenders team, who very clearly had a good read on the meta. And then on Anubis, Jake pulled out, his best hero. I was waiting all tournament to watch it, the Jake rat, right? And then you saw the enemy team had to adjust, right? Where they ran Orisa Sigma with Zen Bap, and it was just too much poke. Then they swapped out to Ryan and Lucio to try to close the distance. You eventually won the map anyway, but you can see more of that logic going through on how do we adapt our strategy to just like one little different pick. And that's something that I think Overwatch desperately needs. And it used to have when we more so had these more short term tournaments where you had to take more time in prep, but you don't really know until you get on the stage. But if you're on the stage all the time, then it just sort of changes the whole dynamic. So I look
Well,
forward to
yeah.
that hopefully being more so not only in the Overwatch League, but hopefully with this like tier 2.5, tier 3 tournament structure. With how successful it's been, you'd imagine that they'd keep doing it.
Yeah, well, this actually, I'm glad you bring this up here. This actually brings up a topic that it's been on my mind for a long time, and not every day that you get the chance to ask a former high tier player, such as Jake, ask about this. So, Jake, let me think how to phrase this question. Obviously, the Overwatch League is phenomenal, right? I didn't really think that so quickly, so fast, I would see Overwatch go from a startup game to having this professional level, almost like NBA real sport level casting, desk, the whole setup, the whole production value is phenomenal. And it has been obviously really, really popular. But of course, Overwatch League, like Overwatch, has been kind of on the decline a little bit, I think it's fair to say, in terms of viewership and interest. And I think there's a lot of factors we could get into about why and how it could be fixed. But speaking of what
I don't know
Frito
if that's
talked
actually true, by the way.
oh,
I think
you,
most people look at the Twitch numbers and those are not as good, but it's also because as Twitch has declined, they've been adding more and more and more ways to view the product. So I believe actually, if you like all the aggregate of all the viewership data across like the Chinese platforms, and the TV broadcasts and the Twitch viewers, and I think they're broadcasting on like more Western sites as well. But
hmm,
but regardless, I think like the aggregate is actually strong, but it's just that it's like in if you're in the US, you probably feel like it's going down because the US platforms are like basically I think that the Chinese viewership is becoming a bigger fraction of the total viewership, but I don't believe that this has like negative implications for Overwatch League generally, just
mm-hmm,
because of the fact like that doesn't really matter, right? Like where the
okay,
share of the viewers are coming from. So
yeah,
it is something that like I can see where people are coming from on that front, but I don't think that's technically correct based on like from the purposes of is this a viable business model?
sure,
Then Twitch viewership is like Twitch is actually a relatively minor fraction of the total viewership of the league. So at least in terms of like like their distribution model. So it's pretty hard to judge without doing like a real analysis because they have like I mean it's unlike a lot of esports where that truly are broadcast only on Twitch and maybe on
hmm,
YouTube too or something like that. But the fact that it's on traditional networks like television and also on specifically the Chinese streaming platforms are apparently extremely popular. So I think it's a little the story on exactly like is it growing, is it not growing is actually more complicated.
ah, okay,
I don't even really know all the
hmm.
answers myself, but I do know that if you just look at the Twitch numbers, um, you get a very inaccurate picture of like what's the league's actual business model.
Well, I'm very, very happy to be corrected on that, and thank you for giving that. This is why we have you on the show, Jay, because you give us the kind of information that laymen like myself would lack. But actually, this is great because this is something Frito and I were talking about off stream about the general viability of esports, and Frito actually shared a good video with me with Mark Cuban talking about whether esports are viable or not, and he was of the perspective that it kind of isn't as viable as it should be, and he was afraid of sort of investing on a personal level because he felt like, particularly in the Western scene, it isn't very viable. He feels like it's a much more dominant thing in the Asian market, but on the Western side in the U.S., kind of Europe, it isn't quite so strong. So I
I
guess
think that's a fair perspective, honestly. I don't disagree with that, but I
hmm,
also think that like the fact like the popularity in China and Korea especially among other areas in Asia. But I agree, like that is the region where esports is most
Mhm.
popular. So it's hard to get an accurate perspective on it as a Westerner, because your natural perspective is this thing popular among my peers in the West,
Yeah.
English speaking. But of course, it's a global business, so it demands like a more fine comb analysis there. But I think his assessment, I think I've seen that video actually. I think his assessment is quite on, in that right now it's like it is a really it's a much better business in Asia than it is in the West. I think that's definitely fair to say.
So I mean that I'm conscious that Frida hasn't spoken in a while. I want to have him have his say as well. But I'll just ask you another question then. Are you generally happy with the direction Overwatch League is taking as a viewing enterprise? Well, I'd like to talk about it as a pro player in a little bit later, but as a viewing enterprise and as someone invested in the Overwatch community, I think we're all rooting for Overwatch to be more successful and bigger. Are you generally happy with Overwatch League?
I don't know. I guess it definitely beat my expectations. I thought that it would be like way more difficult than it has. It seems like they've met most of the challenges that I thought would be insurmountable. So I mean, this is definitely the big year of like the real challenge is the global travel element of it, because it's a hell of a lot easier to do a broadcast when everyone's in Los Angeles than to do truly broadcasts from all around the world to the whole world in a different place every week. That is a much more significant challenge. But from all the people I've met that are working on it, I mean, like it's not like a pipe dream. It's like, well, like let's do all the logistical concerns. And as far as the business model, I mean, I don't know like the super high level stuff on like, what is it going to be? Is it going to be there in 20 years? I don't know like what those projections are. But just as far as my flavor is like, I was getting to the play Overwatch League. I'm like, I don't care if they waste all their money. Like they're wasting it on me, baby. Let's go. So I feel like they beat my expectations already. But can they do it again? This is the big year. I mean, I totally think those assessments are fair. Like this is a really key year to see, will those be borne out? But this year, and also, this year is definitely going to be a bumpy one, I think, just because like there's this massive new challenge. But the real question will be like, maybe a year or two from now as well. Like once this model's been implemented for a couple years and it's actually refined a little bit, and the whole logistical side is done better through the with the value of experience through like this year and next year, maybe 2 years from now, 1 year from now, then I think will be a more fair assessment of like what does this look like long term, because the first year is not ever going to be like the first year of the global side of it is not going to be a fair assessment of will it long term work.
Mm.
As much as it's most likely going to be right. Like the first year is going to be the hardest year. Like there's no reason it's going to get harder later. So if it can work now, then it's looking very, very good for the future. But even if it's not 100% perfect now, then it's still possible that it could succeed as time goes on. It just depends. I mean, if it's like a total abject failure, then okay, that's pretty bad. But in my opinion, this year is like such a tough challenge. It'll be hard to look at like this sort of model. It'll be hard to use it as a fair litmus test for like long-term future, because it looks to me like the market's only getting better. The medium's only getting more popular. So even if it's not like profitable to run something like this now, maybe it's possible that they're close enough that it's just worth continuing.
Mm. Fair. Frito, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground there. So I tend to agree with the leaning towards optimism anyway. I don't know what we really can expect of the Overwatch League right now. And so maybe Mark Cuban's right with his billions of dollars that right now it might not be a good idea, but I think all of us would like to see it move in that direction maybe in 5 years or something. And overall, I would say I'm most happy with in all things that are Overwatch in the Overwatch League itself. Like it probably does the best out of anything that they're doing with the IP. And it's more so the concerns of like where the game's at and how the audience responds to the game and how playable it is and what the meta's like. And there's so many things that I feel I'll jumped into and the game wasn't necessarily ready for it, because usually a game comes out and it's out for years and the format of the game gets developed over time. But right away, basically, it was like, oh, here's an esport. And we just got like roll queue in the middle of, season 2 and all the meta ramifications that were prior and afterwards due to that. So I feel like it's still getting kind of solved or fixed or finding its base point right now. And that's sort of where I'm always want to gear my attention towards, because I want us to jump towards that as a community and as a game together in that direction. And once we find a comfortable area to rest, then it won't feel as chaotic and mismatched. And unfortunately, there's just always going to be these growing pain moments where, in all likelihood, I think next year Overwatch League, the viewing numbers from what we get to see is probably going to go down because the events are all over the place. Like, am I going to watch the Asian events at 3 a.m. live, like, or whatever it's going to be? You know what I mean? Like, it's just not physically possible. So that might benefit in some way, but because really the ideal of the league is that you pay attention to the teams near you, which in every other sport that works, right? As long as you have that local pride and you either go to the event, fund it that way, or there's viewership around and sort of the camaraderie, which they've been trying to build thus far, that'll be fine. But me as a fan, of an esports fan and as a content creator, I'm not used to that at all. I'm used to just seeing the scope of everything. So, there's multiple good things that I think comes from that, but also like risks and pitfalls and other things that I think need attention. But more so would be on the game side with either picking up the pace of balancing or figuring out the format, as me and SVB like to discuss anytime we get the opportunity to.
Anytime anyone lets us.
Anytime that people don't shout us down to shut up about it. But it seems like day by day, more and more pro players and streamers are on the change the Overwatch format train. But I think that type of thing is just inevitable eventually, if depending what your goals are for the game.
I think the game is right now ready for a hero ban. That's my.
Oh yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, I know. I knew you were on
this
that.
This is the group up shot bingo. If anytime anyone mentions hero bans, you drink a shot.
I try not to say the word hero bans because I think people have their head wrapped up in what that means. So that's why I usually say format change, because that leaves it more open-ended to what, I'm optimistic and not necessarily tied into one answer. But anyway,
let's hear. Yeah, Jake, go on. Hero bans, why, how? Let's go. Oh, I think Jake is actually disconnected because rather fun.
Banned Jake out of the call.
Yeah, we banned him. I think Stream de-doxed him because he mentioned it. They were like, we don't want to hear any of that.
I told you, man. You're not allowed to say hero bans.
I can't. I should. I think the stream coded in something that said that if someone mentions hero bans, the first person to do it will get instantly disconnected. It's quite an amusing position as well that Jake's been disconnected in. I'm sure Twitch will enjoy seeing this.
We'll let him reconnect in a moment, but to that point, I think what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of expectations that I think the competitive community has on the game of Overwatch, like team comp diversity or just strategical diversity in general, or a skill bias. One of the two things, right? I think if there's a lame meta where it's not very diverse, but it's at least very skillful, then the complaints aren't as high, but they still get pretty bad. Like when Widow was meta, there was tons of complaints from tank players that have to wait around just on corners half the time. And, there's the dive meta, the supports weren't really happy. So it's pretty difficult to find a singular meta that everyone likes. And I'm convinced that everyone will be upset about it until there's an actual format change, whether it be hero bans or, I'm not too excited about other solutions, quote unquote, such as a hero pool, because like we have a map pool now.
Welcome back.
I'm back.
Here he is. We have a map pool now in ranked, and I'm not sure how well that's actually working. Like I'd much rather have selecting maps or vetoing maps or something like that. Whereas right now with the map pool in ranked, you end up playing the same map a couple times in a row, and I think people hate that. And I think that's worse than somehow curating it yourself. And I think a hero pool will have a similar effect where, sure, you might be able to, force a different meta, but you're still playing another singular meta. It's no different than like them buffing or nerfing a hero out of existence. It's the same thing. Whether it's a patch rotation, a hero rotation, that sort of thing doesn't work for me. So,
I mean, I don't think you can really add something like hero bans to ranked without like, I don't know, it's just going to be weird because how do you actually figure out? I don't think the game's ready for like 6 bans a team. I mean, I think that's too much given the hero pool. I think the game from a competitive perspective is ready for like 1 ban per team. That's like what I would start with, because I think that the reality is, I mean, most people think that if you have hero bans, then somehow you're going to play less heroes. But it's like, man, we literally play 6 heroes total in a match. Like that is the absolute mathematical minimum number of heroes to be played. And you can see a lot of Overwatch League matches where there are a total of 6 heroes played. by both teams. Maybe they go fucking Tracer for 10 seconds to stall the point. Okay, you know, like that doesn't count. You know what I mean? Like it's not like a real viable long-term pick. That's like, you know, these tiny niche scenarios where you cannot win, therefore you just delay with Tracer.
Hmm.
You know, like, which I don't think is really like saying that Tracer is viable. Just if that's the only thing you can play Tracer for, she might as well not be a hero. You know.
Yeah.
But I really think that what hero bans do is they mean that you can't be relying on one dominant strategy. I mean, one thing that I think, like, to go back on the idea that, you know, in the past there was a long time where you didn't have these super calcified metas where everyone played the same thing. But I actually think that was because we weren't so good at the game back then. Like nobody was very good at the game back
definitely.
then. And if you go back and you watch old gameplay from like the first year the game came out, everyone was garbage. Like compared to a modern pro, like everyone was bad. The best pros were not good at the game. They're just not playing nearly as well. Their positioning wasn't nearly as good. They weren't optimizing their team strategy nearly as well. The ult usage wasn't good. Like everything was wrong. Honestly, if you go back, like everything has gone through so much refinement. That one of the last things that is just like a mathematical principle of the game that really is what dictates how the modern pro scene is played. The reason you don't switch your character is because you lose your ultimate, and like that is just math. Like you know, like you can't, like the hero, in order for justifying your hero switch, it has to be like somehow better than the ults, which is very hard to do. So like playing a comp that does not switch, that can work in every scenario, and just making this one comp work everywhere rather than figuring out a different comp for every situation, is just like you're going to have more ults throughout the course of the game if you play like that. So it turns out that just having like more total resources at the end of the game probably means you win, like compared to the team that switches back and forth to, now on this part of the map we're going to go dive, and then on that part of the map we're going to go back to the slow comp. Like that is just really inefficient to play like that. So in order to justify it, you need to have really, really high levels of success with dive. Like you can't just win one fight with dive. You need to like full hold them at that point in the map without ults, which like there's realistically no comp that actually does that anymore. Like if you're fighting a team with ults, it really doesn't matter if you counterpick them. You're going to lose the fight to like their ults. And then, you know, there's this whole, like the risk reward of doing that is insane. Like if there's one part of the map that you can play dive on, like the risk of going dive on that part of the map is like if you fail to full hold them, you lose. So it's like a total all in, super high risk. And in order to take the all in, especially if dive wasn't good at the start of the map, or like if you know, if you take the risk, like you play dive because it's better on first point defense, but it's worse on every other part of the map, then the problem is like the moment you lose first, it's almost game over, because you're gonna get the next fight, you're gonna lose to like one ultimate because you're gonna have swapped all your heroes. The enemy team is gonna know, and if they're a good team, they're gonna know that you have no ults, and they're gonna be just taking a slow fight until they have one ult that kills you, or just the Hanzo Dragon. Like it just does enough where once you're mirror matching, it's just like just one ult is usually enough to just win like almost all the time. Like you usually do not need more than one if the enemy team has guaranteed 0, like if you take a comp reset. So it's a really big deal when you reset the comp, because it makes it incredibly obvious that you have no ults, compared to keeping most of your heroes. Like even if you don't have ults, having like 60, 70 is almost impossible to track like with that level of precision. So if they keep their same comp, you're usually going to be suspecting, hey, there's an ult coming up soon. And you know, like, you know, you have to like keep that in your mind. And when you full swap and everyone's at 0, it's like the next ult from the enemy team is like gonna come in 60 seconds. You have so much time to get your ults off and like get the perfect execution, wait for the exact moment to use your ult. Like you can just, everything can be so simple compared to when you're always worried about what they might have, and they always are like one ult after another is coming up. It's much more difficult to counterplay than a team without ults. You can play so cleanly, and you can play in this like really simple way for a pro player, where you're playing like a very, very defensive style, and without ults, it's very, very hard to break those sort of plays. Especially when, you know, there's heroes like, I think the biggest problem right now is really like the Sigma. It might be Sigma really just being way too good of a hero. I mean, the hero is just like better than all the other tanks. Like
When he's
really
maxed out though, like at the pro level, Sigma's really tricky to discuss, because when you speak of them in a pro context, they're hitting every shot, right? And
exactly, it's a high skill
when you have
hero.
to bounce for all players, then right now Sigma feels terrible, and for most players.
I mean, I think balancing for all players is completely impossible. Like it's like saying A is B. Like it's like that level of like logically impossible, because unless all of the heroes are the fucking same, like unless they're all railgun, you know, Quake, like we all have the same stuff, that is like you cannot balance unless every aiming style is the same, you know, like you just cannot balance like so that like grenades in Quake are just as good as the lightning gun. Like you just cannot achieve that, because one of them is a really good weapon for like spamming enemies that you don't know their exact location, and therefore you're not aiming precisely. You're just aiming like, you know, a sort of a knowledge-based thing. And the other one is like, no, like you see the enemy, keep the crosshair on their model, and then you do more damage. Like you just cannot balance those two things for two equivalent or two players at different skills. Like it doesn't take as much skill to know like roughly where the enemy is and shoot pipes that way or shoots rockets that way versus like the railgun where it's just click on the enemy, right? And we have railgun heroes in Overwatch, and then we have heroes with aimbots, like actual aim locking and stuff, like or that basically don't aim, right? Like Brig or something, right? Or has very very little. Like your aim on the whip shot will make a difference, but it's not like McCree where like if you can't hit headshots you're not good, and if you can hit headshots you are good. Whereas McCree, like you're not saying Brig, oh what's your whip shot hit percentage? It's like, are you in the right spot? Like the skills are just different, and trying to balance for the whole player base is basically the same as throwing up your hands and saying we're balanced for nobody. Yeah. Because like if Jonak is playing Moira, like if the best aim players in the world are playing Reaper, like I mean your game is not balanced. Like your game is definitely not balanced for pros, because this is a hero that like Reaper is not. I mean Reaper has aim, right? Like you can aim precisely in the middle of their model, but it's just easier than playing McCree. Like it really is. It's just like success on Reaper does not demand the same level of precise aim that success on Widowmaker and Tracer and McCree demand. And that's just like, that's okay that there are these different heroes with different skill set requirements. But if they, as long as they decide, like as a development, as long as they actually are looking at data from all levels and they're actually trying to balance for all levels and keep everything at 50% for everyone, I think that we'll never have a properly balanced meta ever.
Wow,
because it's just totally impossible. Like the only way to get a balanced meta for pros is if you balance for pros. The only way to get a balanced meta for low level players is to totally not care about pros. Like you cannot do both. And I just would submit that low level players just don't care about balance that much. They might just play the same hero patch to patch, even if the hero gets buffed or nerfed. They might like those things might just not matter to them. They just like playing the hero. They play it. That's their best hero. Like when you're a newer player, the differences between like your ability is actually a really, really important detail. Like if you know this one hero super well, it probably still is the correct pick for you. But at the highest level, that's not how it works. Like if a hero is better or has more potential, you just learn it, right? Like you just spend the practice time and learn it. But if you're not playing the game this huge amount of hours and you're just kind of sticking with what you know, which is what a lot of players do, the game is never going to be balanced. Like half the people are not picking based on what is the best hero or what's their best, even their best hero. They're just picking on what they like, what's fun for them, you know? Like they're not even looking at their own win rates. They're not even analyzing their own gameplay. They're just playing what's fun. And like that's totally okay. But that just means that you're not optimizing for winning every game if you're playing like that. And when a pro is optimizing for winning every game, if a comp has a 60% win rate, you play it 100% of the time. You don't play it 60% of the time.
Yeah.
You play it 100% of the time because you don't play the comp that has a 40% win rate ever. Like you'd be crazy to do that. Like, I mean, if you're playing a comp with a 40% win rate, like we played our dive strat in stage 3 against goats because we knew 222 was coming. Like in scrims, we had like a 45% win rate. We had a less than 50% win rate playing dive, but it was just higher than our goats win rate because we were not very good at goats compared to the other teams. So like, even then, I don't think dive was a better comp. I think it was inferior mathematically, but it just so happened that we were even more inferior at goats because just for whatever reason, right? Like we just weren't that good at goats. So even the inferior comp was still like a strategically better choice for us. But I don't think it was ever, I think a lot of people like see that teams started playing more and more dive strats in the end of stage 3 or in stage 3 specifically, but that's because we all knew 222 was coming. So we knew that practicing goats is like, if we still can't win in goats in stage 3, it's not like practicing for 3 more weeks is going to make us way, way better at goats than all these other teams. And we were just like, all right, well, 45% win rate is the best we can do. And we happened to have really good match performances and did better than that in matches. But it was never, it was never better than goats, like not mathematically, like not from like a analytical standpoint. We were just like, it's better than our goats is what we realized. But the reality is that if you have like a long-term mindset and you don't know when the meta is going to change, you don't know when the next patch is going to hit, then you just have to assume that there's going to be meta forever because half the metas have lasted like 6 to 8 months. So you can't just be like, oh, we're ready for the next meta. And it's like, okay, well, we lose for 6 months and then we'll be ready for the next meta. Like you can't do that. You can lose your job. You know, who's going to do that? You literally lose your job. Like you lose your dream to be a pro player if you do that. Like, okay, who's taking that kind of risk? I mean, that's, you know, I think that's a challenge. I think that's why something like hero bans, it enables you to change competitive play so it's not like ranked. because if you add something like a true rule set change, like a ban, then it becomes a lot more complicated to practice, because you can't just practice the thing that has a 60% win rate and play it 100% of the time, because sometimes you literally will not be able to play that. And that's the only way to prevent a team from just maxing out on one comp that is like overall the best. I mean, the problem is there is a strategic reality in Overwatch that playing one comp is just better than changing. Changing is bad, and unless you have like a really good reason. So playing comps that demand a change, like playing a Bastion comp, for instance, that like you're going to give up when you fail the snowball, but like it has to be so good. It can't just be like sometimes we win with Bastion. You have to be like always winning first point with the Bastion strat to play it. That's why people played on Junkertown, because it was like really good on Junkertown. You could really reliably win like the first couple fights with the Bastion strat. Like it was really hard to beat on defense, but only if the win rate is like super, super high on that first snowball will you ever play that strat. You know, if you only win first point 50% of the time with Bastion, it's just not worth it, because you often get full held at the end of the map because you started with Bastion and then you had to swap on second point, let's say, and you had to switch your heroes, so you lost a couple fights due to ult tempo. Then you only had like one more chance to cap second. If you fail that, then you have like an overall really poor performance on the map. So these strategies that demand that you change your comp throughout the map are just like inferior statistically, unless there's really strong evidence otherwise.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I have to clarify to anyone watching that we have not paid Jake to come and say exactly what we told him to, because this is actually like some people in Twitch chat think that Frito is controlling your mind right now, because this is literally that we've gone on about this and on, and Frito and I have both made videos talking about why we support bans, and the idea of, you know, alt economy, how it has such a major impact on pro level of play, that switching is basically becomes non-existent, and how having a meta comp and essentially min-maxing the meta comp means that you're only going to play the 6 heroes all the time. So I think everyone in this call is in agreement that we need to do something to shake it up. So I'm gonna now arbitrarily take the most extreme stance. Well, actually, it's not arbitrary because I believe in this. So to fill you in, Jake, I've been running a lot of tests on my Discord server, experimenting with hero bans and also exclusive pick. So I'm in favor of the long-term future of Overwatch having an exclusive pick system. I think it would be really good for the game.
Wait,
because
like you can pick a hero, but the enemy team
but the other team can't play the hero. Personally, because and this is where I'm going for the controversial take, because I know that a lot of people aren't happy with this, but I think one of the worst things about Overwatch League is watching a mirror match 24/7 basically, and at the Overwatch League level, watching the same 6 heroes in 12 teams or whatever, or 20 teams as it is now. Basically, I think one of the larger impacts, the macro level impacts it has, I think, is that it diminishes the individuality of each team. So, I mean, as Frito alluded to earlier, one of the fun things about watching Breakable Barriers was watching you play Junkrat, because that's the hero you're famous for. It's your signature hero. Everyone associates that hero with you. And to basically be completely banned out of it from the meta state, it's horrible from your perspective as a player, because you don't get to play the hero you want to play. It's horrible for the fans, because they want to watch you play Junkrat. They want to watch their favorite players play their favorite heroes. So obviously hero bans go some way towards addressing this issue, because you can shake up the meta a little bit. But what I'd really advocate for in the long-term future, obviously right now I think Overwatch doesn't have enough heroes to allow for that. But I think going forwards, we're not that far away from my playtest. I can tell we're not that far away from, if you just take away the mirror match, you actually get to see so much more of a diverse Overwatch. And this is what I've seen from my playtesting, is that suddenly now, at least even from a casual level, the understanding of the game becomes the king, essentially. It becomes the most important attribute of understanding matchups, adapting on the fly, and I think these are the more exciting elements of an esport, is seeing unpredictability, and that's why everyone likes sports. I think the fact that it's not scripted, the fact that anything could happen, is the most fun part, and obviously seeing the mirror match 24/7 is one of the, diminishes that, but also, the lack of surprise. So Frito, I'll let you hopefully completely agree with me and say that I'm a genius.
Well, okay, so to get away from bans a little bit, because obviously I relentlessly agree with at least going in that direction to some degree, but something that I hope is in the realm of what Blizzard is thinking about for Overwatch 2 is this idea that I've been stewing on listening to you guys explain a bunch of problems that we all know to be an issue. And I think a thought experiment we can have is to compare to a game like CSGO, which has an economy system that actually benefits the loser. That's a very different thing. Because in Overwatch, we have an economy system where the resources benefit the winner of team fights, where you get more reward, you get stronger for winning. Whereas in CS:GO, you get stronger for losing. Now, this will sound ridiculous into the Overwatch space.
It's kind of true, but it's not entirely true about Counter-Strike. Like,
Well, at least
it's
as
better
a
to
comeback
win
mechanic
the
is my
first
point.
round. It's better to win the first round, but it's only becomes better to lose once you've lost like 4 in a row. So it's like a comeback mechanic, but once it's only for when you're like really losing.
It makes it
Because
harder to get 16-0.
you win, you get more money. Yeah, that's true. It's true, but you get more money from winning than losing until the losers have lost like 6 in a row. So, like, it's a light comeback. It's like a don't get completely obliterated comeback mechanic, but it is true more of a comeback mechanic.
But do we need that kind of comeback mechanic in Overwatch? I think it's go on, Frito.
Let me just finish the point here. So to compare to what we're speaking about with Overwatch, the way that you could think, the point is in CS:GO, the way that works is that when you die, you lose all your kit, and in order for you to not just get completely steamrolled and have no chance of coming back, there's a small comeback mechanic. Yes, of course, when you have money, you are at an advantage and are more likely to have a full buy, but whatever. Point is, it's in the game. Whereas I feel like in Overwatch, there really isn't anything like that. And to foresee what a type of thing like that could be, probably more like in the sequel, would be if you swapped your hero, you got a bit more ult, or maybe there's certain circumstances where you get a whole ult for a certain type of swap, or this is complex stuff that these are all bad ideas. I'm just saying, like, this is in the area of a format change. Or when you hit a checkpoint, maybe everyone's ults get removed, right? Maybe if ults were the ult economy got reset each time you went to a checkpoint, then both teams could freely change, and it would sort of remove that problem that we're talking about, where, well, you need a comp that does everything, even if certain comps should be good at different stages, because they clearly designed the game for different stages to be good at different things, because there's like a brawly point and then super high ground and then it goes back to, you know what I mean? Like, it's obvious in the map design, but it's the ult economy that's really the issue here. And I think that's another route that I hope the developers are thinking about, because they have the resources to really think this through. And hero bans, to us, a lot of people call it a band-aid solution or too short term, and I think the devs somewhat agree. So I'm just trying to get, more so than trying to have the solution myself, I hope we inspire other people to sort of come up with better solutions. The one I like kind of the best is clearing the ult economy out. That would make it a bit more fair, but it would change the way Overwatch is played fundamentally. And I think that's kind of required for the competitive format. We need things like that so that those fundamentals are allowed to shine, because otherwise we would need hero bans. It has to be one or the other. It can't be done through balance, obviously, and unless it's entirely balanced for the top down, which is never going to happen. Sorry to say. I just know they're not going to do that.
Well, yeah.
Or a format change, or hero bans. That's my little.
I definitely agreed. Like, especially the I think that's an interesting idea. The idea of like resetting at checkpoints throughout the map to like reset your ult economy to make it so that these different stages of the map, you really do have a chance to change your heroes and play a strat that only works on that part of the map, because you aren't just like going to be facing down 5 ults from, maybe their comp's not so good, but like you're going to get dumpstered by 5 ults. I think kind of the root of the problem is the ultimates. I think this is something that people have been saying since the game came out, that the ultimates are way too easy to get and way too strong, because for most heroes of the game, like I would say most, like more than half of the heroes in the game, it's not every single hero, but like the playstyle of your hero might as well be get your ult and use it. Like, get it faster, use it faster. Because like for most of the ults in the game, it's just like an I win button, and having more I win buttons, there's just ults that are just bunkers, like completely broken ults. Like Infrasight is like a completely broken ult. It's like what pro teams do when an Infrasight is up is they AFK for 15 seconds. That is the correct answer, because you do not challenge a team that has wall hacks on all 6 players. Who thought of this? It's a literal cheat. It's a cheat. Don't put this in the game. It means you don't fight. You're like, well, in 15 seconds, they won't know where I am, so I'm not going to fight until then. Like, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit in the corner behind a shield. Like, I mean, they think they have this idea that like, oh, you're going to like play behind the shields. It's like, what happens when you have wall hacks on is that every player in your team can flank, because they all know where everyone is. There's no issue of like getting caught flanking, because you just see them. So like, if they're going to catch you, you know, and you can ask for help like 5 seconds early, you know, oh, I think they're going to check where I am. Come here, let's fight. You know, like, it's just a ridiculous advantage for your whole team. You have, most of the support ults are like, no one on my team can die unless you have this rare condition. Like, okay, yeah, no one on my team can die unless you hit a headshot through trance, or unless you have Bionade. But those are pretty unrealistic. Like most realistically is like nobody's gonna die while my trance is on. Most realistically, nobody's gonna die when my sound barrier is on, and there are a little tiny bit of counterplay. But like the counterplay to sound barrier is like EMP or run away. Like those are it. Like you don't, like there really isn't like most of these ults are not countered. Either one, they're only countered by other ults, or two, they're just not countered at all, and they're just insanely powerful. So that you basically don't have to try to win until you get your ults. It's like if you're gonna build your ult faster, you are like by default winning, and I think that's why this double shield comp is so good, because you win, you get your ults faster. Your tanks don't take damage; they have shields instead, which is like means that you just get more ults than the other team, which means that you win more than the other team.
So my question,
are like way stronger than a hero without an ult, like too much stronger, in my opinion.
My question to you then, Jake, is if you get handed the reins of Overwatch balancing, if you suddenly tomorrow wake up as Jeff Kaplan, or let's say you even got to reset and you got to go again, and you were designing Overwatch for the first time, would you, let's say, how would you change ults? Take them out? Would you change how quickly they're built?
I think there's two. I think one thing that could be interesting is ults on a cooldown instead of on a charge, because I think the charging system is like a nice idea and it rewards you for like playing better on your base hero to get your ult faster. But I think, the reality is that it's like too hard to change at this point. Like the spirit of the game is like the fact that the ults are insanely OP. And some of the ults are like, you just have to make a new ult, because like if Barrage makes you literally not be able to move, it better be able to deal 1,000 DPS or whatever broken amount of damage Pharah's ult does. Like, if Genji or whatever, it makes you fight in melee form, you better be able to like kill people super quick and fly around and kill them all. There's a couple exceptions for some ults that like aren't so good, like I think, or are like much harder to use. But generally they're priced like really reasonably, like they're very, very cheap ults. But I just think overall, like it's a structural problem for Overwatch, like that maybe it needs to be addressed in these other ways. Because I think you're basically looking at totally nerfing every single ult in the game, or like almost all of them, because some of them are terrible, like Tac Visor, but like most of them are pretty good. Most of them are like are quite strong in terms of just making you win. But some of them are just like really, I don't know what they're thinking with something like a supercharger. It's like everybody on my team does 50% more damage, like in the wall hacks. Like, why is that in an FPS game? I don't know. I guess that like they wanted to like go crazy and put all this wacky stuff that you don't expect to be in an FPS game in the game. But there's a reason we don't put wall hacks in FPS games. It's like it's actually a terrible mechanic where giving your whole team a cheat for 15 seconds. I don't know. Like, I just think that what that means is that you just don't fight for 15 seconds until their cheat turns off. It's like, imagine you're playing against a cheater in ranked and you knew that their cheat was going to end in 15 seconds. You wouldn't challenge them. You would just chill. Like that's the obvious answer. And I think especially the other problem with ults is that they play even more to the strengths of very, very high player, or especially teamwork, like coordinated players. Like when you're using your ults willy-nilly and just going for solo ults all the time, they actually aren't so good. Like they actually are pretty balanced in that sense. Like if I'm just going to tire and fly into your team with a tire, there's pretty good odds you break the tire. Like it's not like that hard, it's not like impossible to counter or whatever. But some of the ults are like Infrasight are like require no teamwork. It's just like, wow, we all have wall hacks on right now, or Supercharger, wow, we all do 50% more damage right now. Like you don't do anything, we just are better than we were before. Like we don't have to change anything really.
So I guess again,
the teamwork element of them is really, really oppressive. Like when a team knows how to use their ults together and layer them one after another, it becomes an insurmountable test to try and like out aim an ultimate. Like you're just not doing that.
So yeah, part of what you're kind of touching on again goes back to the underlying idea of balancing the game for different tiers, because in an uncoordinated rank play, it's not so much of an issue. Like Infrasights, people barely make any value out of it really. They kind of piss about for 15 seconds. The Widow probably won't even hit her shots. Her team probably isn't even paying attention on where people are. So it's not really OP, but as you're saying at the high level,
at like a really poor time,
like they're just them, like everybody's
like,
dead
in the middle of a fight or something, or like alone. Whereas if you use it like right when the enemy wants to come fight, like you use it right before they come through the choke, it's devastating. Like it is just, like you have to push into walls now. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. So at the high level, these things have a dramatically different effect. So actually, I have a question for you, but I'm going to let Frito chime in first on what we've kind of discussed here. Frito, any thoughts on what Jake has been mentioning?
Yeah, it's interesting to get the perspective. I won't drone on too much. Let Jake's points stand. As being one of the only casually focused content creators that are still standing, like I feel like whenever I talk to my friends or have a former pro on, they're always so steeped in the competitive side of the game that if I were also in their choose, I probably would agree. But because I, like USVB, have so much contact with the casuals who play this game and trying to get them up to speed into to learning and improving, that I don't agree basically with the foundation of making it too competitive. Because another thing, we were just talking about this earlier, SVB as well, like the changes that they made to shields now, I thought was awesome for high level play. Like I thought it was like, yeah, amazing. Like make it more interactive, great. But there's a big negative downside where a lot of low tier players who enjoyed, maybe let's say, I mean that's not the right word, but poking at the choke and just surviving and existing with a shield, and that was a bad play. But they didn't really need to learn how to take space and have good positioning before, and now they're getting punished for it. And I think they should catch up, of course, but also there's the negative ramification of that where it's just way more punishing to play. So it's very difficult. Blizzard's in an impossible position because they want to make the game feel fun for those players too, and have it be rewarding while also somehow being an esport. It's just sort of the nature of, I think, the way Blizzard designs games now. I think too, like the difference is, I don't know why card games always make a good analogy for me, but it's like the difference between Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering, where Magic the Gathering is a much more complicated card game, and Hearthstone has less cards. It's more simplistic, and it also has a ban phase in the competitive scene. Just saying, but it's not as deep and crazy and wacky as Magic can get. And Overwatch to me is always going to be the Hearthstone version of that. It's not going to be the StarCraft anymore. I think they're going to always keep it to that degree. So I'm a bit more optimistic towards more competitive rule sets, I guess. Like, maybe only in ranked would I suggest resetting ults at the checkpoint, because in quick play, where most people play the game, that feels terrible, right? But if it's like, well, this is because you're supposed to go and change your heroes and things like that, then that makes a little bit more sense. The more we talk, the more I'm like, that's actually a great idea, because a lot of the problems that we bring up sort of vanish when it feels that way. Also, I think it would make it feel a bit more like Koth, where you have multiple rounds, in different Koth maps. When it's a great meta, you can play different comps. That does happen. I think that would kind of solve this issue maybe, and it might kill more than one bird with
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea for sure, like the reset, because it basically like creates a sort of mini Koth round mechanic where like when the checkpoint hits, there's like a time. Although I mean, I guess yeah, it's sort of inevitable you have to sort of reset all the ults, but it also means that like sacking is not going to be as good anymore. You like should commit and have a chance and like just give it a shot, because you're losing your ult anyway, so let's use it, And so I think it'll be more like explosive. There'll be more like attempts at comeback plays, even if they're futile, because why not? Let's take a shot. I lose my ult anyway, use it or lose it. Which I don't hate that mechanic at all. I think it would kind of create a sort of mini Koth dynamic, which I think is why Koth is the most fun game mode, because there's like, if you get completely blown out in a round, it's like, okay, back to the drawing board. We got it's like a fresh start on the next round. And maybe you get blown out twice. Okay, we lose. But getting completely devastated the first round doesn't mean that the game is just over. Whereas if you get completely devastated, like you lose first point in like one fight and they like crush you and they have like a way, way big advantage in their ult lead, then you're going to get snowballed for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and only like a disciplined team, like eking out one item at a time. Like by the time you get to the last point, you have a chance to stabilize and hold there. It's like that is how it is right now in Overwatch. Basically, if both teams play equivalently well, if you stomp the first fight, you are going to keep stomping for like 3 more fights if you can manage it well. And that probably means you get almost to the end of the map still stomping them, just because that one fight went so bad. Like if you get their Widow gets 2 kills and they just end the fight for free, and you like can't even farm ults, your team just gets destroyed and you're just shooting shields. Like the next fight, they're going to use like 1 or 2 ults because they know you're poor, and they're going to win. And then the next fight after that, they're going to have like their tank ults and their support ults. And they're just going to get those first and use them first. And you're going to lose that one too. Then you lost second point. Then the enemy team can like take a chill pill, and you have to like, now you're starting to get all your ults at the same time, because you've been relying mostly on passive generation instead of on farming, which is inferior, which means you get them all at the same time, which means you're likely to overuse rather than use them very, very efficiently one after the other. And it becomes really hard to predict what the enemy has, because when they start cycling the first ult really quick, like if a DPS gets their ult and just ends the fight with it instantly by like insta barrage, and you end the fight or something, then when the next fight happens and they've got these tank ults and support ults, they're charging those next ults up with the benefit of winning a team fight off of their teammates' ults. Like the supercharger's on, I don't need the barrage anymore. I just kill everyone on fair and I have another barrage. Or the Sigma ult comes through and it's just easy pickings for like a sniper to farm the last of their ult. And then so that there's like a real the synergy with your teammates' ultimates creates this like devastating snowball unless the game is very close, which is actually quite rare. That the game is like super close from the beginning. Like usually one team takes a lead early because that cleanup factor of like farming ults is just devastating.
I could tell Frito's desperate to say something. Go on, Frito.
Well, two things. One, I do want us to move on to probably what might be the last subject, which I do want to talk about the current meta and issues we have with that. But one thing that I forgot to mention in my half-baked ideas earlier with the comeback mechanics and stuff like this, here's another potentially bad idea, but if you gained ult from dying, like a percentage or a chunk or something like that, that would also help this economy problem. I don't like this solution, but it's another type of almost CS:GO thing. Like if you died 3 times in a row, maybe, or something like that. I don't even know how you gauge that really, but that's like.
I mean, the problem is people would definitely game it. There would be like times you can jump off the map and punish, so you do it to get ult. Like, I mean, I think that would be the issue is people would be gaming it and like intentional suiciding for a reason, and I don't think that's.
I think the checkpoint idea works a lot better, but I just want to
and
in that area.
There's lots of ways you could get the same result or.
And to add to what Frito's saying as well, I just want to like in moments like these, I think it's on me at least to speak for the casual or the community. I won't even refer to them as casual players because the vast majority of the community are, even who are playing it competitively, are gold and platinum, right? And these, like, I have a lot of contact with players at these ranks, and I think they would be mad at me if I didn't try to represent their perspective in a conversation like this where we're all like talking really high end top tier stuff. And I think to that aspect, ults are one of the great levelers in the game. And I think one of the reasons people love Overwatch so much is because unlike other FPS games, it is accessible to someone who doesn't have high mechanics, and there's a potential for someone to achieve success through knowledge and through just smart play. And I guess I would put myself in this category in that I'm pretty garbage mechanically, and I've gotten a firm schooling of this having played Apex now recently, where I now realize that the only reason I ever climbed in Overwatch was because I understood how to play Ryan, a hero who required no aim. But hey, if I know where to position, if I know when to shatter, if I know how to protect my teammates, I can still climb the GM or whatever it is. So, to that element, is there something to be lost? I mean, obviously, ults are both a serious problem, as you guys are saying, at the high tier, but for the majority of the players, they're also kind of the saving grace of the game. They're what make the game fun. They're what make you feel like you could actually have an impact on the game, even if you're having a terrible game. Well, if you use your ultimate properly, maybe you'll have impact for your team. So, I guess to propose a solution to my own problem, and something that Frida already said, do we need different rule sets for comp or even maybe Overwatch League and pro play and regular play?
It should be considered at least. I hope so.
I like the idea of changing. I mean, I used to be super excited by the fact that Overwatch is like pro play is just the same as ranked, and like they're just the same thing, so it's really like good. And I think it is good for the pro scene. Like if you can achieve that, it is a positive end, in the sense that like someone who comes up in the ladder, it's not like they're playing a different game, and like they're playing the same game. I mean, maybe there's a lot more randomness and it's a little more crazy in ranked, and like it's very different than an organized format. But the technical elements of the game are the same, which I think is a good end. I just think that insofar as they won't balance for pros, it's not really worth it to keep it the same. Like what you do when you create something like a ban option, what I like to see in the Overwatch League is each team it's something that wouldn't even work in ranked because it requires you to play like a map set. But if both teams get 1 ban per map, and they cannot ban the same hero twice, like each team can. So if you ban Widow first map, I can still ban it second map. But let's say, so just basically to prevent, hey Carpe, I ban Widow 5 times. Good luck. Or something like that. So like the star players are still going to get to play their heroes, just not 1 map. They're not going to be able to basically. And if you did it blind from the rosters, that would mean that even if someone's like, a quote unquote one trick or like a specialist player on that role, you can't just like see them in and then ban their best hero. You have to ban blind to something like that. So I think that there'd be ways to like restrict the ban so it's not like limiting and not blocking the heroes like people were saying. But if the meta is like 6 of the same heroes, like 6 heroes total in the whole match, like 2 of each, then we literally cannot do worse than that in terms of like viewing diversity and experience diversity. We cannot do worse than that. That is literally as bad as it could be mathematically. So so when you add hero bans in, it just means that you'll have to pick something new because what you were gonna play before is now banned, right? Like and teams are gonna probably be banning relevant strong heroes, not heroes that nobody plays, right? Like most likely. because they want to have an impactful ban rather than a useless ban. Unless they're like super confident in the meta, then you just ban the counter hero to the meta. So, just to like solidify the meta even more. But generally, the meta will suffer a lot more from losing its best hero than the counter picking will suffer from losing its best, counter strat, I think. Maybe there's some exceptions, unless like probably banning Pharah would have like completely destroyed any Goat's counter, because it was like, you just need that hero. Like there's nothing like Fair Mercy to counter
when
Goats.
Jane did this as an experiment almost with the tournaments he ran, what teams would do if they wanted to play Goats, they would ban Mercy actually, because what you want to ban is the branching points, like the tech tree, right? So like if you ban Mercy, you're basically banning Pharah most of the time, generally speaking. But that's sort of where the bans rest and how it would develop. But yeah, I think we've extinguished this point. We kind of violently agree on all ends. So do we want to talk about the meta at all as sort of our the current one anyway, the current patch, because you played it obviously competitively and a bit on ranked from what I recall. I think you even you swapped to your Genji account. I watched that stream actually. But do we want to talk about how the game's currently balanced and issues we have, like working within the framework we have currently,
Sure.
other than trying to redefine the game?
Sure, and I think it'd be good. Like, let's start with Jake, because he obviously fill the top layer, and then Frito and I can fill in on the bottom layer, as it were.
I currently really like the current meta. I think it's pretty fun. Like even though it's still the same double shield tanks, I think probably the one hero in the meta that is like unpopular is just Orisa. I think that's actually the only like hero that's probably not popular among high level players. But even Orisa has like a lot of mechanical execution difficulty. It's just that she's a hero that basically is just like a combo machine, like a survival combo machine. Like your shield's insane for protecting your snipers and range heroes, and your pull is insane for enabling like pretty much anything in the game is like enabled by the pull. And the Fortify is like the best defensive skill in the game, bar none. Actually is like truly the best, number one by far, in my opinion. Like any hero that has Fortify would just be broken. Like if you gave Fortify to like literally anything, it would be like insane.
Let
Like,
Torb Fortify.
Yeah, I mean, like, Torb might be a legit DPS if he can Fortify on top of his overload thing. Like it's just a really, really, really powerful skill. The damage block plus the CC block plus, I guess it's also stacked because she has armor, so it makes it like really annoying. But every other hero in the current meta, like I'd say the current dominant meta is Hanzo Mei double shield. Like pretty clearly that's like what's emerging as dominant. But I also think that's a comp that is like very like it's not like the Lucio Moira Doom Reaper that is like stand as 6 and int every fight, like 6-man inting, and like yeah, your Doom TP's in and your Reaper punches in, but you all should be going for like more or less the same targets. I think that this is a meta where there's a lot more solo play going on, where like the supports might make a play together, or like the Zen and the Hanzo might make a play together, or the BAP and the Hanzo, or the BAP and the Zen, or like there's all these different little micro combinations that are going to happen as you play, because it isn't sometimes okay you stand as 6 and you all shoot down the lane with the BAP window, right? Like occasionally that does happen, but more often I think the fights are chaotic. The Hanzos challenge each other for the high ground. Like there's a lot more of these individual heavy moments where one player really makes a big difference for their team, and it's not just like a swarm of players like on top of one another. So I think that and also almost every hero, right, is like a heavy aim hero. I mean, theoretically, every hero is a pretty heavy aim hero, like mechanical hero. Probably, like I was saying, Orisa is probably the least mechanical hero of the patch. Maybe Mei is arguably lower, but of course she's like really mechanically heavy with the icicles, and like very decision making heavy with her skills. It's like very you could destroy your team making mistakes with the skills, like using the wall. You could like kill your whole team or whatever. So you need to be like very precise on it. It's easy to make mistakes, and I think that's what most pros want actually. So I'm personally really happy with this meta. I mean, I think it's like by virtue of you playing heroes like Hanzo and Mei, like and Zen BAP, it is like gonna be, especially at lower ranks, is gonna be vulnerable to all sorts of counters, like Hammond, for instance. There's still a few heroes that I would say are like really terrible, like Winston and what's another hero? Winston's pretty bad. Oh, Winston's probably like the only tank that I think is like Winston and Roadhog. I think Roadhog's pretty unplayable currently. Well, at least at the high level.
Definitely at the high level. Very, very, very playable in
That's true. That's true.
Diamond
Honestly,
and
but
Platinum.
when people aren't like really worried about Roadhog and like, him, he gets away with. Which is also why like the balancing issue is like that's why I support the idea of changing the competitive rule set, like something that changes the competitive rule set away from what it is in ranked and people's casual experience, because then it just creates an environment where pros can like balance for themselves, or like if the problem is hero diversity, then you can introduce something that fixes hero diversity just for the pros. Because it doesn't seem like to me like hero diversity is a problem at a lower level. Like a lot of people will say like, well, I can play this at a low level. It's like, yeah, like you can play anything at a low level. I can play literally anything and win every game in plat. You know, like if you're like a really dominant player, you could just destroy everybody. So if you're really good at that hero, you can make it work at a lower level. Like absolutely true. It's only when you get to this like level where literally everyone knows a ton of heroes and like will counterpick you and stuff that there are issues. But even at the highest level of ranked, I mean, you still have players like one tricking sim and being successful in top 500. So it's still like it has never really changed from that. Like I think ranked has kind of always been that way. But it's just a matter of I think the special problem is when you get to a high level, you start to see a lot of players in ranked who like actually want to be pro players or like can imagine that. Like they can imagine competing and reaching success. And for those players, that's when you're like, no, I want to play the meta because I want to not just be like a good enough player, not just get a high rating, like win games, like i.e. my hero is viable, but I want to win the maximum amount of games that I can possibly win. And that's when you really get this dominant meta where the same thing happens if you're playing for a pro team. It's like, that is my job to win the maximum amount of games I can possibly win. And that's when you end up playing the comp with the 2% higher win rate. You play it 100% of the time, you know? And I think that's why we maybe need a different rule set, because the people are just, they have different motivations. They have different you know, there's different issues. Something, you know, at low level, people aren't voiced very much. So the coordination is like kind of out the window. Like it is more of like a solo play game, you know? So that probably makes a hero like Roadhog way, way better. But if you have a whole team, everyone's working together. Hey, Roadhog on the left flank, don't get hooked. Okay, I'll save you from the hook. You know, like that's where Roadhog is like, okay, I just can't do anything. I just feed ult. You know, it's a hero that basically only gets picks. That's basically all he can do is kill the people and get picks and feed ult constantly while he does it. But you know, if he is getting a lot of kills, yeah, it is good. It's just that a very coordinated team that will defend each other. Like even if they get hooked, they will like go kill the Roadhog instead of the Roadhog just getting away. You know, which is something that is a coordination problem. So I think that it all kind of comes back to me to the oh, I mean, I guess to go like back to the original question of this meta, I like it a lot. I think there's actually going to be some flexibility, especially some map flexibility. I've seen the Orisa Brine. It's good on a lot of maps. The Orisa Hammond on a maps with like a lot of knockoffs is actually quite good. Like Sanctum, I would say like a Nepal Sanctum, it is actually probably the default meta is probably realistically is Orisa Hammond, more so than Orisa Sig even. So there's definitely like a lot, like compared to last meta where it was like really bad, like you do not pick other heroes. This meta, I think it is a little more map dependent, although Orisa is a little problematically good, like still the best hero in like the best tank by far. Like there's not really any reason you don't want to play Orisa, no matter what your other tank is.
There's so many sort of points here to touch on, Jake. You always drop a lot of interesting, so much. I think what I want to mention there is the idea about balancing differently, you know, and for different pro scenes and the general ladder. Because as you said, you can kind of get away with anything in the ladder. But funnily enough, one of the things about that is that the reason you can get away with anything in ladder is because people in ladder haven't learned how to do what people in the higher ranks are doing. And obviously, this is something I just made a video on actually about why there's a problem with the sort of trickle down of education of why people in, let's say, platinum and diamond, which is an above average rank for the player base, don't play above average in terms of their understanding or tactics of the game. They don't play anything similar to what you would see in a pro team or a tier 2 team. And one of the reasons for that is that there just isn't enough help bring that knowledge top down to these players. Now, a potential issue of separating the metas is now we're leaving the players even more at sea, in that now they can't even look at the pro level for help in how they're going to win their ladder games, because their ladder games now doubly don't look anything like the pro games, because that's kind of already the problem. Again, I'm going to try and speak for the players here of the general ladder plays, that's already their problem, is that they feel so at loss because they watch a guy, they watch a pro player play, they watch someone like you stream, Jake, and they're like, oh yeah, I see what Jake did there. He called out to his Orisa, he called out to his Roadhog, and they did XYZ and it worked so well. And I go into my game and I do it and it doesn't, like, no one's even invoiced to listen to me first of all. And then when I launch my halt, nobody's following up. So there's this very interesting dilemma of how do you help the players in the sort of the general player base and the general ranks overcome the issue of a lack of knowledge, because at the end goal, these are the players who will eventually become pro players. How do you help them reach that while simultaneously keeping the metas helpful to both the pros and the general player base. I guess what I'm saying is Blizzard have a hard job, and I shouldn't maybe give them so much shit as I do, but there's a bit of a conundrum there. Frida, I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on that. Oh, Jake, if you have, go
Oh,
ahead.
You can go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that hero bans actually, for competitive, like changing the rule set, I actually think instead of like if you add something like hero bans and your goal is I want to increase the hero diversity with pro play because pro play is too stagnant and we play the same 6 heroes all the time, which is how I look at it right now.
Yeah.
Basically, because if you ban like we have to play more than 6 heroes and one of them's banned, you can have your really calcified meta, but if the other team's like, no, we're going to try and stifle your meta, then throughout every map, they're going to ban like a different, one of the different core meta heroes and try and force you to adapt in 5 different ways throughout the course of the series. Let's say it goes to 5 maps. Then I think that actually kind of goes towards solving the problem of the educational aspect, because if you see the pros play literally the same comp every single game, I mean, the reality of Overwatch is that if you change one hero, you need to change your whole game plan. Like just because you're still playing Orisa doesn't mean you play Orisa the same. Like if your teammate plays Hanzo versus your teammate plays Doomfist versus your teammate plays Reaper, you need to do very different things to enable that partner hero. And I think that part of the problem is that if you watch pro play, you only get to learn the comp with the 55% win rate, right? You don't learn anything about those other comps because nobody plays them because the win rate is just not mathematically justifiable. So if you actually create a condition that forces people to play other comps, then you actually get to see what happens when Reaper's banned or Doomfist is banned and someone plays a different DPS and now the Orisa has to combo with them. What are they going to do differently? Maybe they're going to, save the pull late in the fight so that once the Fortify is down, then McCree can like flash the halt and get like a big AoE stun that is like really actually, it's like a really damaging thing to the other team if you can land a combo like that. It's like a shatter, like a micro shatter. But it's like you just never ever see that outside of maybe like high rank streaming. There's like a lot more versatility because people just play random stuff or people are one tricks or whatever, so you'll see a little more flexibility and you might see the adaptations of like, what do I do when my teammate picks Symmetra? Because that's like some heroes are like you really need to do something different. Like heroes like Symmetra and Torb are like you need to just completely rethink what you're doing because like you cannot play aggressive with those heroes. It's like how do we create a situation where they're in a really bad spot and we're just like relying on because like the builders are relying on like holding down positions almost always, and it's just about like how to understand every map, like how to use the sim TP, like can we get to the point faster and then just camp it there with our sim, and like you'd never ever see that in the Overwatch League because nobody plays those type of heroes. But if you have more bans, my point is that you will see like people having to replace the meta with, but now we have a McCree, but now we have no Orisa, we have a Hammond Sig, or now we have no Sigma, we've got Orisa Hammond or Orisa Rhine. Like if you see the pros playing these different strats, they're gonna also play those strats well because they're gonna like know what to do in the different situations. So in fact, the chaos of ladder is actually better replicated by a competitive scene with a different rule set, because if you add these bans in, you see more hero versatility, more than 6 heroes at least in pro play. Then that means that you can go to your rank play and you can maybe have an idea of like, oh, I saw what happened when this team played that team and Doomfist was banned, so they played Reaper McCree or they played whatever, Reaper Hanzo, and like then they played maybe a little differently with their DPS strat. They were focused on breaking shields or something. I mean, it's gonna be hard to learn. Like it's not easy, but the big problem with trying to learn from pro play is that you only get to learn like the best comp. You don't get to learn any of the comps that are like close, but just like 2% worse, 2% worse, 2% worse. Like you don't learn anything below that very like the theoretically perfect comp. But you actually, if there's hero bans, you'll see all these different, like what does the team do to innovate when they can't do that, and how do they react when their teammates are playing different heroes?
Do you think
like, instead of just one thing?
Do you think one ban would be enough? Like, how do you think one ban right now would affect?
I think we should start with one ban. I don't think we should go crazy and like add too many bans, because there could be some competitive issues where like now I can ban 2 heroes, so I can like ban out, I don't know, like some like 2 heroes that kind of like if I ban 2 tanks or something like.
Well, yeah, you have to balance that kind of. Yeah.
And so I think like starting with nothing, we should start with just 1 ban each, because that's like the absolute minimum. Personally, I'm not a fan at all of like the idea of select picks or like or maybe there's like a protect phase or something, but I don't know. I don't like anything multi-phase is like it's logistical complexity. It's hard to do for the Overwatch League. The most easy thing to do is just 1 ban at the same time you submit your roster. You both ban blind. If you really want to do like a home team advantage, then you can have the home team ban second, and that'll give like a real home team advantage to the game. And it's not like a big one, but like theoretically the second ban is like more informed than the first ban if it's done blind. Like if you know their ban and they don't know your ban, then
Yeah.
you have a slight edge. Maybe they ban the hero you wanted to ban, and you're like, I learned something now. So and then you have the flexibility to go second. That's always an
And
advantage.
are these global bans? Like both teams ban?
Yeah. I don't support any sort of non-global banning because there's certain maps that it would just be it's just not balanced. Like Junkertown first is just like it's not balanced if you don't have Widowmaker. I mean, like everyone will pick Widowmaker.
So
And,
how
like,
do
it's
you
whoever
think
gets
it
first
would?
pick takes Widowmaker, and they're like, hey, good luck. This map's fucking massive. You literally cannot deal with this. Like, there's no hero in the game that deals with this. I mean, you can go Hammond and Sombra. Good luck to you crossing like a mile of distance without having the Widow's 5 teammates kill you. Like, like there's just maps where there's like a certain hero is just too good. Like, it's just too good. And like I think Junkertown first is like what immediately pops into my mind of where like if you don't have a Widow player, it's over. Like if they have a Widow and you literally cannot pick Widow, like I mean there's just no dive comp that crosses that quantity of space. It just doesn't exist. Like and then you could play Hanzo or Ashe, but they're just super inferior at that range. They're like, you're not actually as good as a Widow. So some heroes like just are only countered by themselves in certain environments, or like Tracer on some maps is just like you just really need a Tracer to duel their Tracer. So I think that it would introduce some really unpredictable, like some banning problems where like certain map, if you have first ban on that map or first pick on that map, you just like have a really crazy edge because this one hero is so broken to first pick.
Yeah.
So I think like the global aspect of it means that you can never do something like that. It means that if you're banning a hero, nobody gets to play it. So
and I guess that's why you're also
counting themselves is the issue, really.
I guess that's why you're also against the exclusive picks that I'm kind of talking about.
Yeah, but it's the same thing, right? Exclusive pick or just ban for the enemy. It's like the same.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into the tangent there. I would love to discuss that, as anyone knows. Give me a chance, and I'll go into 10-hour rant on it. But Frito, you haven't had a chance to speak up for a while. Anything you want to add to this? What's being talked about?
Yeah, we covered lots of stuff. In fear of just droning on forever, I want to be respectful of time. I don't know how much longer we're going to go, or how long we've even gone. I've enjoyed the conversation thus far, though.
Sure. I mean, do you guys have a sort of time limit when you need to get going by?
I mean, I'm pretty free, but I'm probably gonna eat dinner soon. But like, I don't know.
Is this gonna turn into a dinner eating stream?
Yeah. I gotta go get food.
Frito, do you have to get going soon?
Yeah, I don't mind ending it here as well. I think we've spoke a lot about things. It's nice to hear Jake say the things that I've been saying for years as well, because I feel sometimes community members just need to speak to each other. I bump into Seagull or something, and it's just like we're all kind of saying very similar things, and it's just nice to hear it come from another perspective, because it's surprising how much we usually all agree on some of the core principles, and I've essentially said many of the things that were in Jake's most recent rant and many of the rants in this podcast thus far. But I think I'm not too tied to whether ranked has the same rule set as Overwatch League or the pro play, because I also agree that we're mostly changing it so it replicates what you experience in ranked anyway. So like that's kind of the goal of it. And I do believe that that's the case. I don't mind if it's in both whatever rule set there is, but I just want to see some movement in that direction. But it may not be till Overwatch 2 where we actually start to see some of these things get discussed. Even when we're talking about more of a draft system and things, if they add 20 heroes in the sequel, I mean, there's at least going to be 5, right? But there could be as many as 10, 15. We really don't know. And if there's that many heroes, maybe this conversation about like, well, Widow's just too advantageous on Junkertown, maybe that conversation looks a little different. I think the format we're in now is still in flux, and we'll see quite a big shakeup come a year or two.
Let's so I guess an eye on the future then, and see what changes Overwatch comes. Last question then. One change right now to the game. What would you do? Frito, you're first.
Oh gosh, you put me on the spot. Like 5 May nerfs. I don't know. This is a totally different subject. I did want to talk more about balance. We kind of ran short of time, but the issue is.
Well, it could be a balance change.
I would say May for balance. I can't think of anything else right now, but I will note that like I agree with Jake, and this is probably one of the best possible types of metas we can get. So I don't really want to hear too much complaining, because this is like the best meta we've had in what is it, years now? Like let's just be happy we're shooting each other again. And yeah, I know there's drone. I know May's kind of easy, and or sleeper or whatever. Fine. Like this is a much more entertaining base point. And even though I personally don't like May, I don't like Reaper being as strong as they are, You'd also have to nerf Hammond as well, I think, in conjunction without breaking the game, because right now the meta comp just shifts entirely if you can just have Hammond rolling through nonstop. Everything's really severe right now in a very fragile place, and we're lucky it's in as good of a place as it is. So that's my closing rant. I would like to see those things looked at, but I fear to speak up and say, well, do this for sure, because I think it's going to have ripple effects that we have no idea the negative implications at the moment, balance-wise anyway.
Jake?
I would say I share your positive feelings about this meta. I mean, I think like just bringing back these like aim heavy heroes, most roles be like on an aiming role, on a mechanically demanding role. That's like, as a pro player, that's about as much as you can ask for. That's what we've always been asking for like the past years. Like, just give us our aiming back. Like, give us aim heroes back. Because if you practice aiming all day long, like you want to aim, you want to show your skills, you know, and the heroes that don't really get to do that, or that their primary mode of playing the game is just not dependent on that, are just like going to be less satisfying than the ones who do get to aim and do get to hit the flashy flicks and the huge connections, you know, the huge headshots, right? So I would say I share your optimism and your positivity about the current meta. If I was gonna change one thing, I think it would be the hero bans. Honestly, I think it would be the team. I like to see them pro play, maybe before it come. I don't know if it should ever come to ranked. I honestly think ranked is like not in such a bad place right now. I think maybe if you had that hero ban in pro play, and so you get to see pro players modeling a wider variety of strategies, that might be that educational element that you're looking for. Of like, instead of you literally watch the pro scene, it's like you learn how to play exactly one strategy every single map, every single situation. But in ranked, you'll never get, especially at a more average level, you'll never get that sort of perfect meta, like very, 10%, 5% of games where you get actual, like, everything looks like it does in the pro game. Let's do what the pros do. So having more variance of what the pros do means you have a wider sample of stuff to look at. So I think the hero bans, that'd be what I would do.
Yeah, I also kind of agree. I'm gonna cheat my own question though, because I'm gonna give two answers here. I think for the high level, I think a systematic change is good, because I think, as you guys kind of touched on, I think the meta is good, and I think trying to constantly tweak one hero or the other, it's fine. Obviously, it's what the devs will have to do, but it's not a reliable way of fixing the game. Anytime something gets broken, you can't always rely that the devs will get the perfect balance, because every time they drop a new hero, there's another one in a million strings to pull out, and the house of cards gets bigger. So I think a systematic change is the way you have to look at it, and the way I see it, the hero bans, although I'm in favor of going further in the long term future, I think the one hero ban is a good idea to start with, because it allows the players control over their own game, and I think that's what's really important, is allowing the players some level of autonomy in the fact that if they feel a certain hero is broken, they can take it out the meta. If they feel that a certain hero needs to be looked at, they can take it out the meta. So on that side, that's what I would go with. But again, I don't really think that it's going to be a popular in ranked or that effective in ranked. So for ranked, what I would actually like to see, and for the general Overwatch player base, is more systems, as I talked about in my last video, to help them learn. So more resources. So like I said, an inbuilt guide system, more sort of intra-game ways of looking at what someone is doing in a high level, and breaking it down for the players, because asking them to go to YouTube to learn all the time it's not a healthy way to get players to learn your game. And if your tutorial only tells you how to run around in Soldier 76, and you've got a broken system in the game. So that would be my answer. But I know we've ranted long enough, so I'm sure you guys are sick of our faces, sick of our voices. But thank you so much for joining, everybody. Thank you so much on Twitch. And of course, thank you to Frito for joining me as always. And Jake, thank you so much for joining me, guys. Time to sign off.
I'm changing my answer to reset old sun checkpoint. Sorry, that's our answer. I'm going with that.
All right, well, thanks, guys, for joining me. It's been a real pleasure. See you guys soon.